Hello，你好，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger. The date is April 23rd, 2025. Yes, you're getting a black screen, no nice looking tree in the yard today because it's getting pretty late. And I imagine even if I set up the camera, you guys wouldn't really see much. Anyway, by the way, question of the day. Do you guys prefer the black screen? Do you guys prefer them looking at the tree, or do you guys actually prefer like how we did this in the early days where I sit at the table and you can actually see me? I imagine looking at me talking about Chinese history for an hour wouldn't be very fun, but I don't know. So you guys can let me know in the comment section. Um, Now, if if I was to ask you guys, if you are going to time travel back to the ancient China, and what would you do to become the ruler of an empire? How do you make the dynasty or the empire strong? I imagine some of you would say, well, gold. Um, and some of you say, oh, I would develop sugar. And some of you would say, I would develop weapons. Some of you would say, I would build many houses for my people. I will make sure my people have a lot of good stuff, like economy is strong, etc., etc. But I imagine not too many of you would say that you would focus on mining or distilling salt. Yeah, salt. Not any kind of special salt, but the everyday salt you put on your food. The salt you find on your dinner table, the salt you find in the kitchen. That salt. Now, some of you may be very surprised that salt was very instrumental in the rise and fall of not just one, but quite a few dynasties and empires throughout Chinese history. This thing that we take for granted that well, you can get it for free when you go to McDonald's, you can just get all those little packets of salt free of charge. This free, like really low budget item was the cause of wars being won and wars being lost. But before we get into that, I want to quickly review some vocabulary that you guys may need when you go to Chinese restaurants or when you eat with Chinese people. Traditionally speaking, in the Chinese kitchen, in the Chinese household, there are seven items of the most important. And these seven items is 柴米油盐酱醋茶，柴米油盐酱醋茶. And we'll go over each one of them. Number one, 柴 means 木材. 木材 means wood. Now, this is not so important today, obviously, but in the old days, you needed 柴 for you to be able to make a fire, for you to cook. So 柴 was very important in the Chinese household or Chinese kitchen. The second item, 米, M-I, it's from 米饭. 米饭 means rice. Okay. Now everybody know Chinese people eat a lot of rice, so I don't need to really expand that on that. So the second most important item is 米 from 米饭. The third item is 油, Y-O, 油, and this is cooking oil, lamp oil. 油 basically means oil. So when you want uh, cooking oil, when you go to a Chinese store, you say you need 油, right? The gasoline you put in the car, that's also called 油, but it's 汽油. Um, 油 is basically oil, and depending on what's in front of that word, it's a different kind of oil, different kind of gasoline, and so on and so on. So the third item, 油. And number four is our topic of the day, yen. It's like saying Ian, the name Ian, you just say it quickly, yen. That's salt. Number five, jiang. Uh, Jian, jiang. Almost like saying the name John, but you just say it like jiang. Jiang is soy sauce. Huh. So again, it's very important in the Chinese household to have soy sauce. Number six is chu. Chu. Now this is a weird word to say for non-Mandarin speakers. It's like saying the number two, but it's more like TSWO. So chu. Chu means vinegar. Then the last one is cha. CHA. Cha means tea. Chinese tea. So cai, mi, you, yan, jiang, shu, cha, the seven most important items in the Chinese household: uh, wood, rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. Now, some people have argued that uh, that's crazy. Like uh, the last item should be sugar, tang, not tea, cha. So some people will argue and try to say it's cai, mi, you, yan, jiang, chu, tang rather than jiang, chu, cha. But traditionally speaking, Chinese people did not really use a lot of sugar. So sugar was honestly quite rare. Like most people didn't need it, didn't want it, didn't have it in their kitchen. So let's focus on our topic of the day, which is yen, salt. So why do I say that salt was responsible for the rise and fall of many dynasties and kingdoms? Why is salt so important? Well, there are two major reasons, and they're very simple. Number one, everybody needs salt. Okay, you can go without tea, you can go without sugar. Like we are okay, we are totally fine if we don't eat any sugar for our whole life, because we get sugar in our fruit and juice and stuff like that. We are okay without drinking tea our whole life, right? And in a modern household, you don't even need wood. So wood is obsolete. And if you cook with an air fryer, you don't need oil, right? You can actually do your cooking without oil. So a lot of these basic necessities are no longer necessities. But guess what? You still need salt. If you don't eat salt, your hands will swell up, your feet will swell up, and you will eventually die, right? This is why salt has been so important, not just in China, but in the Arab countries where people sweat a lot in the desert. They always carry salt pellet with them, just in case they get salt deficiency from sweating so much. So that's the first reason, because human cannot live without salt. But the second reason is that salt is one of those things that you can't grow or make yourself. Now nowadays you can just go and buy it anywhere, and like I said, you can get it from McDonald's totally free. But in the old days, when you think about it, okay, let's look at all the other necessities. Wood. Well, if you need wood, you just go and cut down a tree or go pick some off the ground. Go into the forest, look for some branch. Wood is relatively easy to get. Like if you really need wood, chop up a furniture, bust up a furniture, you get wood. Uh, Rice, you can grow it yourself. So like China has no shortage of rice. Like a lot of people grew rice. Um, Oil, well, technically speaking, it's harder to get. But if you buy fatty pork, if you buy bacon, you can actually fry enough oil out of that and reuse that oil for cooking. Like if I cook a pound of bacon, I end up with enough oil to last me a whole month. So oil is something that you can kind of accumulate yourself, acquire yourself easily. Uh, Soy sauce, well, it's a little bit more difficult, but if you have soybeans, uh, you can make soy sauce, but I mean, you kind of need salt to make soy sauce in the first place. So that kind of became a moot point because without salt, you can't make soy sauce. Vinegar, also kind of easy to make if you know. All you have to do is get some fruit and uh, veggies and stuff like that, and let them go bad, and uh, learn how to bottle your own vinegar. Like people make wine at home all the time, so making vinegar is basically just the same as making wine. Uh, so at the end of the day, uh, maybe salt and tea were the two hardest things to acquire, but even tea, you can actually grow a tea plant in the backyard. So if you know where to get the plant and you grow it, that's still you can get your tea very easily. And people were able to make tea not just you don't need a tea like jasmine tea or stuff like that. People can make teas out of pine cones and all kind of crazy stuff. Like if you have a rose bush, here's the tip: you can make tea out of rose petals, and that it's actually quite delicious. So you can make tea out of all kinds of stuff. But salt, in case you never thought of this before, if I tell you, okay, from now on you can't buy salt anywhere, you have to get it yourself. I think most of you wouldn't know how to go about getting it, right? Like, how do you make salt? uh, like even if you know how to where to go and dig it out of the ground, which is very difficult, you got to have the right equipment and techniques and distilleries and ways to refine it to turn the stuff you dig out of the ground into salt. You don't just dig into the ground and get salt. Let's say you live near the ocean. Well, that's a little bit easier because you can distill salt. You can filter salt out of seawater, but that still takes a lot of effort, right? So those were the two major reasons why salt has traditionally been so important. It's one, you can't live without it, and second, it's really hard for you to get it. It's really hard for you to make yourself, grow yourself. It requires specialized equipment, specialized techniques to know how to make salt. Perhaps the earliest example of salt being instrumental in how strong a kingdom could be was we're going back to the time of spring and autumn chaos in Chinese history when China was split up into 16 little kingdoms. Uh, about 1,000 years BC, about 1,000 years BC, there was one of these kingdoms called the Kingdom of Qi. Uh, like, uh, like when you say my Qi is messed up, my that spirit energy, my Qi. Okay, this is the Kingdom of Qi. Kingdom of Qi for most of the uh, period of spring and autumn was the strongest kingdom. Right? It dominated for almost 1,000 years, and the reason for that was because the kingdom of Qi was right by the ocean. Most of the other kingdoms were inland. Now, in case you didn't know, the first king of the kingdom of Qi was none other than General Zhang Ziya. Yeah, that General Zhang Ziya from the Investiture of the Gods, and we talked about the guy who appointed the Jade Emperor, who was the guy who was trying to save the Jade Emperor throne for himself, and then got cheated out of it. That Zhang Ziya, that General Zhang Ziya, so he was the first king of the kingdom of Qi. Um, and as soon as he became the king of Qi, Zhang Ziya uh, encouraged his people to cultivate salt from the ocean. because they were right by the ocean, and you can get basically unlimited amount of salt from the ocean. Later, his descendants, the later kings of Qi, also brought in several rules to secure their hold on the salt market. The first rule was any civilian that cultivated or distilled salt, any outfit, any operation that produced salt within the kingdom of Qi, of course, they could only sell to the government. So you're not allowed to sell to each other. You're not allowed to sell to outsiders. You can only sell to your government, and the government will buy as much as you can make. And obviously, you are allowed to keep some for your own consumption, keep some for your own household. But if you want to sell it, you can only sell to the government, and the government buy up all this salt and either sell it back to you at a markup or export it to other kingdoms and make gold and silver off of other kingdoms. The second rule that brought the Qi kings brought in was that you could not work the salt distillery or the salt wells uh, outside the allowed time. So the only time you were allowed to um, cultivate salt and make salt was uh, October, November, December, and January. Why those months? Because those were the months that farmers didn't have anything to do on the farm. Those are winter months where nothing can be done on the farm. So those were the months when farmers were sitting at home, had nothing to do in the first place. So the government said these were the only months they were allowed to produce salt. Any salt that were produced outside these months were illegal. The reason for the government did this was that so it kept a tight control on the amount of salt that could be produced every year. I mean, I don't know if you guys tried this before, but if you want to distill salt, if you want to get salt from seawater, it takes a long time, especially back then when there's no electric equipment and stuff like that. Everything had to be done by hand. It would take like days or weeks for you to get enough salt to be worthwhile. Like, it's going like let's say you put a tub of seawater out there, uh, uh, and hoping that the sun will evaporate the seawater, and you can get the salt. Well, I I don't know if you guys have done this. If you put a bowl of water or a cup of water in your bedroom, and just leave it alone, usually it's going to take at least a week before that bowl or that cup is empty. It takes that long for the water to evaporate, right? So if you want to do it for seawater and then to get enough salt to be worth your while, it would take a really, really long time. So by the government making us, you have to restrict yourself to these 4 months of the year, the government ensured that the salt production was limited. So you're not going to end up with so much salt that you drive the price down. Also, the government did this to prevent farmers quitting their job to make salt, because obviously making salt is still easier than growing rice or growing fruit or raising chicken and stuff like that. It's more profitable. So the government wanted people to still work the farm and raise the animal, so they limit the amount of time they could spend making salt every year. By having a firm hold on the production of salt and the export of salt to other kingdoms, the kingdom of Qi was able to stay being the top kingdom out of the 16 kingdoms for almost 1,000 years. uh, no one dared to mess with them because it's one of those cases where you mess with me, I cut off your salt supply and your people will die. So they basically had everyone over a barrel, so to speak. This all changed when the kingdom of uh, King uh, came about. In case you guys don't remember, this is the kingdom where King Shi Huang uh, ruled, the guy who had the Great Wall built, and the guy who designed the water system in the entire China. The guy who ended up uniting all the kingdoms under one banner and turned it into one giant empire. That King Kingdom. Right? So how did the kingdom of Qin uh, got past that chokehold on salt by the kingdom of Qi? Well, it's almost like fate wanted it done that way because even though all the other kingdoms have to rely on the kingdom of Qi to get them salt, the kingdom of Qin was able to not buy salt from the kingdom of Qi because there are caves, there are some rare caves in the mountain regions near the kingdom of Qin that have a really rare form of mineral deposit, and they basically could they were basically salt. It's a very low grade, very wild salt. But the plus side is this kind of mineral salt, you don't need to process it. You don't need to distill it. You don't need to do anything. You can just scrape it off the cave wall and you can put it on your food and it would just work like regular salt. So even though the production of this salt was very limited because it's a natural resource that uh, you can't really grow yourself. You have to just go and look around in the caves and hoping you find a deposit. Um, this allowed the kingdom of Qin to not have to rely on the kingdom of Qi and their salt. And then as soon as the kingdom of Qin started battling all the other kingdoms, when King Shi Huang and his king military invaded other kingdoms, their strategy was always to target the salt production of whatever kingdom they were fighting. When they invaded the kingdom of Wei, for example, this is not the same kingdom of Wei as in the Three Kingdom time, by the way. This is a earlier kingdom of Wei. Um, a little bit of a digress here, like in case you guys wonder how were these kingdoms named? Why was there a kingdom of Wei here and then a kingdom of Wei later? Why so many of these kingdoms have same name throughout history? Well, the reason is because these kingdoms were named by the name of the region, the geography. Okay, so even though back then it's the kingdom of Wei, for example, today it's basically like saying the kingdom of Shanghai. Okay, so the Wei, the Qi, the King, the Shu, although they were not people's name, they're not named after their king. These kingdoms were named after the region, the part of the geography they were at. Okay, so Kingdom of Wei basically just means the kingdom that was in the Wei part of China. So yeah, that's a little bit of a side trivia. Okay, back to the Kingdom of Qin. When King Shi Huang and his military invaded Wei, the Kingdom of Wei sent 250,000 soldiers to defend their salt production, and all 250,000 soldiers ended up being slaughtered by the Qing military, and the Qing military took over the salt production of the kingdom of Wei. And then when they fought the kingdom of Liao, they took over the salt production of the kingdom of Liao. Not only did the Qing military specialize in taking over other people's salt production, they also specialized in improving upon, perfecting the salt production that they take over. So there were quite a few new technologies and techniques that King Shi Huang uh, invented during his time. Whenever he took over one of these salt production, he would improve upon the design. He would make sure that it produced more salt. So by the time he conquered four kingdoms, five kingdoms, he had so much salt that it wasn't an issue for him anymore. They didn't have to rely on the salt to scrape off the cave wall anymore. And from there on, there was no stopping him because, the kingdom of Qi traditionally have relied on their control of the salt trade to keep other kingdoms at bay. But now that salt is no longer a problem for the kingdom of Qin, uh, Qi was no match for them. And this was how Qin Shi Huang and his military were able to uh, conquer every other kingdom by stealing and pillaging their salt supplies and improving on the production of salt. And in the end, he was able to unite all the kingdoms under the Qin Dynasty banner. So yeah, I think this first example that happened uh, 2,000 odd years ago, 3,000 years ago, like these definitely give us a good look at how powerful salt was, how salt was able to allow you to control your people and other kingdoms if you had control of the salt supply. But at the same time, salt was also instrumental in the downfall of two dynasties in Chinese history, the Tang Dynasty and the Yuan Dynasty. Yes, the Tang Dynasty, that Tang Dynasty, the greatest dynasty in Chinese history, the greatest time of Chinese history, that Tang Dynasty, it fell because of uh, salt as well. So how did this happen? Okay, in the beginning of the Tang Dynasty, salt was strictly produced and owned by civilians. It was all private. So all the distilleries or salt wells or salt mines were all privately owned by civilians. Civilians were allowed to trade salt and sell salt however they liked, and salt was in at a very good supply at that time in the beginning of the Tang Dynasty. Everyone was happy. Salt was pretty cheap. It cost about uh, 11 copper coins for a cup. Well, it's like 2 cups of salt because the cup back then was bigger than the cup today. So just so it's easier to understand the progression of the story, we'll just say 11 cents. 11 cents for a cup of salt. Okay? That's how cheap it was at that in the beginning of the Tang Dynasty. In the middle of the Tang Dynasty, there was a big riot, a big uprising called the Anshi Rebellion. The Anshi Rebellion. We won't go into all the details about what Anshi Rebellion was, but basically, uh, the rebels were really giving the imperial army the butt kicking of their life, and the Tang emperor at the time was unable to handle the rebels. Um, so one of the local magistrate um, of one of the towns decided that he have to raise an army to help the imperial army, and but he didn't have enough money because you know the government, the imperial government, was busy fighting the Anshi rebels, and there's no extra money for anyone else. This magistrate, hoping to help his government, decided to take over all the private salt production in his city. So basically, he went around and confiscated all the salt production in his city, put the city under martial law. Okay, guys, now all the salt you make belong to the government. And he sold those salt and use the money to raise the army uh, to for himself, and then he used that army to help the imperial army fight off the Anshi rebels. Okay, so that was a very extreme thing to do, to confiscate people's salt production. And but you can understand it was it was done for a good cause. It was done out of desperation. That's the only way he was able to get enough money to raise the army. However, like many things in life, when you do something out of desperation, when you set up a principle of doing something so extreme, you open the door for people to abuse it. So even after the Anshi rebellion was put down and the kingdom was put back, the empire was back in one piece, the other magistrate in other cities started to say, well, shit, if that guy could confiscate all the salt and sell it and make enough money to raise the army, hmm, let's just think what we can do. Now that we don't need to raise the money, we don't need to raise money for an army, but we always can use more money. So magistrates from all over the damn country started to confiscate salt production facilities from the civilians. And pretty soon, near the end of the Tang Dynasty, the salt production became owned by various local governments rather than privately owned by civilians. And because of that, the salt price went up drastically. Initially, it was 11 cents for a cup of salt. By this time, the price of salt went up to $150 for a cup of salt. And then a few years later, at its peak, the salt price was $300 for a cup of salt. And all this money was going to the pocket of the local government. Now, some people would say, well, that's good for the government, isn't it? Like, then the government make a lot of money. No, not really, because there's only so much that the civilians will get pushed. If you make things so uncomfortable and so ridiculously expensive, the civilians going to fight back. And how do they fight back? Black market salt. Black market salt. Okay, so salt, black marketeers that dealt in salt popped up all over the country at the end of Tang Dynasty. People that there were people that would actually uh, go and steal things or rob a gold mine and then take that gold and then go to a salt distillery and give them the gold and tell them, I'm going to take over the distillery, take the gold and go. I'm buying the distillery from you, and if you say no, I'm going to kill you. Like, people were so overwhelmed by the government's chokehold on the salt production that they resorted to illegal activities. Uh, it's like during the prohibition in U.S. history when they wanted to crack down on alcohol, and then what happened? People started to make moonshine, right? Like, there's sometimes you just have to learn from human history. You can't stop progress. Like, you can't stop things like this. Like, uh, when you try to stop it, then you just go underground. It will, and when you go underground, you lose control of it. And that's exactly what happened at the end of the Tang Dynasty. Um, there were private armies, private rebels popping up everywhere, taking over salt distilleries, salt farms, salt fields, salt mines. Um, it got to the point that even two of the biggest salt mines near the imperial city itself got taken over. And when the emperor sent his army to go take it back, the army was soundly trounced by the local black marketeers and their private army. That's how rich these private marketeers were getting. At the end, all these salt merchants and private marketeers banded together and they grew so strong that they were able to overthrow the last Tang emperor, and thus the most the strongest, the best dynasty in Chinese history ended at the hand of a bunch of black marketeers that dealt in salt. The same fate would later happen to the Yuan dynasty, where the Mongolian people ruled China. After Genghis Khan had fought so hard to take over China, his descendant would lose China back to a bunch of salt-dealing black marketeer Chinese people. One of them was named Zhu Yuanzhang, who became the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty that replaced the Yuan dynasty. So you see, salt could build a kingdom. Salt, if mismanaged, could also destroy a kingdom. I hope that this has been an interesting a little story time for you guys. Thank you for spending the evening with me, and I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, for some more video goodies. For now, 谢谢 and 再见。